Welcome, Karl. Um, really happy to have you today for this interview. Can you explain to us what has created the current semiconductor situation?
Well, as you know, the semiconductor supply capacity is currently in shortage. And this is actually across the board. If you think about where we have the shortage, it's in memories, it's in logic chips, in power electronics, as well as in the materials that are required to create these semiconductors. And basically, this has started since the middle of last year. We are seeing an overproportionate upswing in semiconductor demand. In this, COVID-19 really drives the appetite for semiconductors with big expenditures for stay-at-home applications like laptops, servers, Netflix, cloud computing, and all these type of activities. And this coincides with the global 5G rollout, which is creating also huge demand for chips. And then another factor are the US-China trade tensions. They are putting further pressure on the demand. And basically, in this case, Chinese Huawei has been sanctioned and huge pull-in orders have been over-amplifying the demand. In addition to that, SMIC, the largest semiconductor producer in China, has been restricted to procure important equipment. And this has led big semiconductor firms to look for capacity outside. And then what happened by summer, fall 2020, automotive semiconductors showed an unprecedented V-shaped recovery. And this was basically driven by the strong market bounce back in China, which created huge challenges for auto OEMs who now have to compete against the big players from the consumer electronics side. And this is nothing they're used to because the tier one landscape currently revolves very much around automotive. With the COVID vaccinations now starting, we are also seeing big shortages in the raw materials like silicon, because some of the more advanced vaccine vials use the same silicon material needed to manufacture personal computers. And this impact on the supply chains is about to be huge.
Thank you, Karl. Really interesting. So what advice would you give to procurement professionals these days? Because they've got to manage some of the risk associated with these shortages.
Yes, Harry, I think the most important advice is that risk management should be a long-term activity and not only start at the point when you see a difficult situation coming. In this holistic monitoring of the supply side, like market trends, suppliers, supplier KPI, and prices should be a key role of every category manager and supplier organization. Think about upcoming risk and mitigation measures should be made as an integral part of your regular commodity strategy. And this has to be updated. A long-term risk perspective should actually also look at the demand side. This is what procurement sometimes forgets. And it has to be well aligned with marketing and sales to see the demand changes early to be able to react on time. And then if you think about, a lot of procurement professionals say risk mitigation might involve some sort of dual and multi-sourcing. Yes, this is a help. However, this should not be seen as a guarantee to get supply in times of allocations. Equally important is to forge close ties with your suppliers and forge joint value partnerships to win the mind share of your key suppliers to really get the goods and the supplies when you are in a location.
Thanks a lot. I really think that focusing on some of these elements of collaboration is really interesting here. But what about a company who's got some rather small volumes? Is there any hope for them? Anything they could be doing? Any recommendations?
Yeah, I have to say, definitely small companies have a much smaller buying leverage and therefore lower priority to get supply in these difficult times. Even more so, this requires to be able to take bold moves in terms of risk management, and especially in semiconductors. As you might know, the semiconductor industry is driven by regular market up and downturns, for cycles happening over the last 30 years. And if you know that, this should be a key part of your semiconductor risk management, especially for small companies, where you have to use this time to invest in building inventories during the downturn, because you know there will always be quite a steep upturn. So therefore, the small and medium players in the industry who took the chance to do this around about April, May timeframe are now ahead when it comes to the market picking up. And I have to tell you, the automotive players, for instance, like Toyota, who are propagating just-in-time and followed basically the just-in-time system, they were very much affected. However, in that case, Toyota actually made the right move. They started to build inventories and to deviate from the just-in-time principle, just-in-time to be basically on the market upswing. And then what follows also for small companies, besides that differentiation in the eyes of your suppliers, being a key innovation supplier and having that status for smaller organizations is even more important.
Well, thanks a lot. Maybe now we could look into the future of this very specific market. What would you see as the trends that will be influencing the semiconductor market over the next 5 to 10 years?
So definitely there's a huge upswing in semiconductors, and some industry forecasts are saying that we are at the start of a sustained, unusually long upward momentum that could continue throughout the 2020s. On the plus side, there's actually double-digit structural growth in IoT, cloud-driven data centers, artificial intelligence, 6G upcoming. There is an ongoing equipment of sensors in all different kinds of devices. We see automated driving coming, which will require even more innovations in types of semiconductors that will be needed in these products. However, on the minus side, I see the trade war between China and the US, a decoupling of global supply chains, protectionism. We see big capacity shortages in raw materials. We see a lack of human talents in R&D. And as well, we see over-amplifying demand patterns and more volatility than we were used in the past. And just looking at that list and comparing it to previous semiconductor cycles, I think the outcome will be more vertical integration, increasing scale in both procurement organizations and suppliers, and more M&A. On the supply chain side, we are already seeing new applications upcoming, such as AI-supported evolutions in risk management, relationship management concepts, and supply management. On top of that, we will also see a resurgence of more classical concepts, such as inventory management in semiconductors that will be able to process order-based requirements of different customers much better than previously. And in these cases, obviously, the more control and multi-tier supply chain visibility you have as a procurement across the entire supply chain, the less buffers you will need. And this will